we will begin with a public hearing. I am now opening a public hearing on House Bill 3363. House Bill 3363 is related to the Racial Justice and Equity Student Collaborative. And if I could have Lisa Gazelser give us a brief summary of this bill, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I will summarize the -2 amendment, which replaces the measure. The -2 amendment requires the Department of Education to establish a work group to establish standards for selecting members of the Racial Equity and Justice Student Collaborative, establishes work group membership requirements, duties, and meeting requirements, establishes the Racial Equity and Justice Student Collaborative, establishes member requirements for the collaborative, requires the Department of Education to ensure that each member of the collaborative has sufficient support to enable participation and resources to reimburse adults who provide transportation or other support, requires school districts to ensure that student members have access to counseling and tutoring, requires adult collaborative members to ensure that student members have access to an adult mentor and opportunity to provide peer support, establishes duties of collaborative and related meeting and reporting requirements, requires ODE to provide staff support to collaborative, requires appointments by April 30th, 2022, appropriates an unspecified amount of general fund dollars, declares emergency effective July 1st, 2021. And since this is a public hearing, we do not have fiscal or revenue impact statements on this amendment.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So we have three legislators who are going to open up the bill. We have Representative Neron, Representative Reese, and Senator Frederick. Please go ahead and get started in the order that you all agreed on.
I don't believe we agreed on an order yet, but I'll start out and let's go in the order that you suggested. That was a good one. Thank you, Chair Alonso-Leon, Vice Chair Weber, and members of our committee. For the record, I am Courtney Neron, State Representative for House District 26, which includes an increasingly diverse community from Wilsonville to Hillsborough along the urban growth boundary line and many, many students. I am here today as a proud sponsor and advocate for House Bill 3363. After the many opportunities I had as a student leader and my years supporting student leaders as a teacher, I am committed to elevating the voices of student leaders during my time here in the legislature. I continue to consult with students on bills and prioritize their needs. Students deserve to have their voices heard and valued, and I'm so excited we'll be hearing from some today. This is why I'm such a strong supporter of House Bill 3363. The focus of this bill is to create a statewide collaborative of students from all over Oregon, especially students from historically underserved and underrepresented communities, to engage in the policymaking and implementation process. Not only does this bill remove barriers to statewide student leadership opportunities, it also gives students the opportunity to shape how we engage more individuals from underserved and underrepresented communities on both a regional and statewide level. Students are the center of our work, and this bill creates a process for them to help translate their wisdom into advocacy and public policy. As a legislative body, we need to make sure that we fund and respond to student needs, and I believe we can do that best by listening to and understanding their needs. Please join me in a commitment to hearing students and recognizing their lived experiences by supporting House Bill 3363, and thank you again for hearing this bill today.
Thank you, Rep. Neron. Rep. Reese?
Thank you, Chair Alonso-Leon, Vice Chairs Weber, Neron, and the members of the House Education Committee. For the record, my name is Ricky Ruiz, State Representative to House District 50, which covers Gresham, East Portland, and the indigenous lands of Chinook and Cowles tribes. I'm here as Chief Sponsor of House Bill 3363 and advocate of the Racial Equity and Justice Student Collaborative. While you've heard the content of the bill, I want to emphasize the student voice and involvement components and express my strong support for student leadership and advocacy. We as a committee have looked into ways that we can increase student voice and leadership in decision making, and the collaborative created by this bill would serve that same purpose. It would examine current state initiatives and practices related to student leadership and engagement in policymaking process, explore models and best practices in regional student leadership networks and accountability, including culturally specific, community-based models and youth development division programs, make recommendations to the Department of Education, the Youth Development Division in the Legislative Assembly, and the Governor's Office on how to support student leadership networks on a regional level, and report on the collaborative work, progress, recommendations to the Legislative Assembly, and the Governor's Racial Justice Council every 2 years. House Bill 3363-2 creates a racial equity and justice student collaborative, one that is tasked to support students who have been historically underserved. Given the intersectional equity scope this committee has adopted, I see this as the right next step in creating more inclusive and accessible process of advocacy, while also creating a diverse coalition of student leaders when it comes to policymaking at the state level. The council will include students from racial and ethnic communities who have been historically and culturally underserved, including our LGBTQ+ students, those who are bilingual, and our students with disabilities. Madam Chair, we all win when we prioritize diversity and empower our youth. I encourage members of the committee to read over the submitted written testimony from students and the reasons why this is imperative as we look to reopen and transform our schools. I urge you to support House Bill 3363-2. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rep. Reese. It looks like we don't have Senator Frederick yet, so hopefully he'll be joining us. Let's go ahead and have Raymond Arias go next. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Good afternoon, Chair Alonso Leon, Vice Chairs Neron and Weber, and members of the House Education Committee. For the record, my name is Raymond Arias. I'm a senior at Tualatin High School. I am also, as some of you may know from the meetings you've been in pertaining to this bill, one of the students who have been deeply entrenched in this work. As I shared with some of this committee in our meetings, and as I'll share now, I am simply here due to luck and opportunity. Luck was a $300 scholarship I was gifted by the Oregon Association of Student Councils to attend their summer camp in 2019. The opportunity came 3 months later when I was given the chance to run and be elected state president of the Oregon Association of Student Councils, a position which had a mandatory eligibility prerequisite of being an attendee at the association's latest summer camp. You see, without that scholarship, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have fostered my affection for leadership and have contributed to multiple successful grassroots movements in my community. This single involvement has transformed my trajectory as a student and as a resident of Oregon who is now interested in dedicating himself to a career in public service and maybe, just maybe, being in a position at the state legislature like you all someday. No, this comment is not a threat for a face-off election in one of your folks' district in a couple years' time, but rather to drive home the point that opportunity matters, and so does representation. OASC has been an organization that has kept these two matters at the forefront of its efforts throughout the development of HB 3363. With its widespread outreach and multiple events hosted to garner awareness for this work, they enabled hundreds of students via trainings and conferences to give their direct feedback on this potential piece of legislation, which has resulted in the -2 amendment. They understand that when it comes to equity matters, students are primary constituents of importance. That being said, I myself am only one student. I know I have countless talented peers across our state with similar backgrounds, low income, person of color, who have fervent passions just as I do for advocacy. Those students need opportunities that are commensurate to potential and also a platform as empowering and as promising as the one House Bill 3363 offers. So please, use your vote to uplift historically underserved students and continue to make our state more equitable by saying yes to 3363. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raymond. Next, we have Idman Ahmed.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Alonso Leon, Vice Chair Neron Weber, and members of the committee. My name is Idman Ahmed, and I am here today asking you to support House Bill 3363. I am in 11th grade high school, so I'm close to graduating. As a student who's Black and Muslim, dealing with students who say racist things and insensitive things about the color of my skin or my religion and being labeled something I'm not because of stereotypical things related to my race and religion was quite normal occurrence when going to school. A lot of times teachers don't really handle problems like those well because later on they'll happen again and it's not like it could easily be solved by apologizing. So the impact that this bill could have if it passed, it will help so many BIPOC, marginalized minority students like me, because not only will this bill allow students to focus more on their education without having to worry about dealing with problems like those on their own, that support will help students dealing with those problems stop from it reoccurring to them again and again.
Thank you so much, Edmund. Appreciate your testimony. And it looks like we have Senator Frederick here now. Go ahead, Senator. Please state your name for the record.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking me so quickly. I'm Lou Frederick. I'm state senator from District 22. That's North and Northeast Portland. I think actually for me the main thing is not so much where I'm from, but what I've done in the past. I was lucky enough to start a group or be the staff official assigned to a group called the Superintendent Student Advisory Committee for the Portland Public Schools back in 1997. We had two young people, both of them sophomores, walk up to testify and said, "Why haven't you asked us what's really going on in the schools? Why don't you ask us? But we're there every day. We know what's taking place. Why don't you ask us what we need?" And the superintendent, we had been trying to do that for some time. We'd tried to do it by way of student newspapers and student body presidents, but we found that the newspapers, first of all, were being cut because of budget cuts, and the student body presidents and staff were often not necessarily there because they wanted to accomplish something regarding education, but were very, very heavily involved in whether they were popular for that particular group. So they often didn't show up. But these two young people stood there and said, and don't just get the government, the student government folks involved, ask anybody who wants to be involved. The result was we started working, and I asked them when they wanted to meet, and they said, well, we can't meet after school because we have sports and plays and things like that. So when do you want to meet? And I couldn't believe when they said this, but they said they wanted to meet at 6:30 in the morning. And so we met at 6:30 in the morning every Wednesday for an hour, and then they would leave and go to school. And they met I did this with them for 5 years, and they were outstanding on what happened. It ended up with the Portland schools deciding that they needed to have a student body representative on the Portland School Board. They couldn't vote officially, but they then asked their opinion, and they asked for their vote in every one of their school board meetings. The result was an extraordinary result. It was that we were missing things that the students needed. We were missing the opinion and the approaches that they needed, and we started getting some things done in ways that we had not expected. This bill attempts to do the same kind of thing on a much broader scale, and I think it's important to understand the kind of support that it gives. It also does something else. It also actually provides an acknowledgement of the value of students, and that can be important on a much larger scale. When students feel as though they are actually being listened to, that they are going to be part of the decision making, they suddenly take that seriously, and they begin to look at how they can be effective for themselves, and quite frankly, as we always say, the children are our future, for their future. They understand that clearly. So when I heard about this bill, I was very pleased to get a chance to talk about it, and I urge your support for this approach, the support for this bill. If we can get those students involved across the state, especially the students who are part of communities that have not been listened to in the past, this will make our state better and, frankly, our future better. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Frederick. Next, we have Majalise Tolan.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Alonso Leon, Vice Chairs Neron and Weber, and members of the House Education Committee. For the record, my name is Maya-Lise Tolan, President of Oregon Association of Secondary School Administrators. I'm supportive of House Bill 3363-2 because statewide representation of student voice is important and it matters, but we've fallen short in hearing all of them. While some believe students should self-advocate and tell us about unfair treatment, for historically and currently underrepresented or underserved students, that is not that easy. A former student provided me examples of times in my school policies were used painfully against her, and I had been blind to her perspective. Families have shared examples of racial and gender-directed hate speech our students endured during athletics, and they had to handle them alone. This is never acceptable. In our Oregon Students United Summit, we heard empowered students with the desire to improve our systems. They need our help in providing a way to allow them to work with administrators, community organization leaders, and Oregon Department of Ed staff to make positive changes for all Oregon students, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender identity, or disability. If we believe all means all, House Bill 3363-2 starts that inclusive process by providing a statewide platform for students, especially students of color and those who identify as LGBTQ2 SIA+, are emerging bilingual and or experiencing disability to work with trained adults to analyze student input, process ideas, review policies, and provide feedback. Thank you again for your time and the opportunity to testify today, and I urge you to vote yes on House Bill 3363-2.
Thank you, Maya-Lise. And we'll have a few minutes to ask questions at the very end when we've heard all the witnesses. Anderson Dubois.
Hello, it is great to be here. I would like to start by saying good afternoon, Chair Alonso Leon, Vice Chair Neron and Weber, and members of the committee. Thank you for the time here. I come representing REAP as the Strategic Initiatives Manager in support of HB 3363-2 because I understand the long-lasting value and applications of this bill. REAP has worked to consistently elevate the next wave of leaders for the future now as we try and expose students to processes like these and give them platforms to speak. Thereby, we started in collaboration with COSA and setting up an opportunity for students to speak with them on what they think on their experiences within education, which then led us to creating this bill. We've been working in collaboration with OASC and OASSA and ODE and a few other organizations to ensure that that platform is strong and grows, as many others spoke on earlier. We were able to plan out and host a summit of over 200 students to share feedback and give direct input on what this bill
So sorry to interrupt. My apologies, but I got a note that you need to state your name for the record.
Anderson Dubois.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, and so with that, that event went really well. Students were able to come from all over the state to provide direct input on what this bill could look like. And from there, our team worked in collaboration with those organizations to code out some of those themes. And make edits to the bill so that the students' voices could be affirmed. And that's where we are. I'm in support of this bill because it empowers current and future generations of students to elevate their voice, engaging in policies that might affect them and develop skill sets that we all wish we had when we were younger. I'm an alumni of REAP. Actually, I first got involved in high school, and to see that this is an opportunity that I could potentially support future generations with is amazing. I wish that I had a bill like this back when I was in high school, and so to see this work go forward is amazing. And so I just urge your support to vote in support of HB 3363-2 and support Youth Voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Anderson. Next, we have Prasa Chanrami.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Alonso Leon, Vice Chairs Neron and Weber, and members of the House Education Committee. For the record, my name is Parasa Chanrami, and with the Coalition of Oregon School Administrators. On behalf of our 2,500 members, we encourage you to adopt the -2 amendment and support House Bill 3363. We want to thank Rep. Neron, Rep. Ruiz, and Senator Frederick for chief sponsoring this legislation and express how grateful we are to our student leaders and our partners at REAP, the Association of Student Councils, and the Association of Secondary School Administrators for all of their work in developing this bill. Since the summer of 2020, our organizations have been working together to lay the groundwork for a state-level racial equity and justice student collaborative. You'll find all of that work reflected in the -2 before you. Section 1 establishes the interim work group to help develop a process for applying for the collaborative and work with the department on outreach and recruitment. In Section 4, you'll see the actual collaborative being described, everything from terms, representation, supports, to the scope of work. And then we also added in the -2 some clarification on the roles for the Department of Ed, as well as school districts in providing supports for student collaborative members. It is our intention that the work of the collaborative is aligned and complementary to the Governor's Racial Justice Council. And on OLIS, you'll see a letter of support for House Bill 3363 from Alyssa Chatterjee, the Governor's Deputy Education Policy Advisor. Overall, through this collaborative, we're envisioning students, educators, community partners working together with the Department of Ed, the Youth Development Division, and the Governor's Racial Justice Council to support students as they pursue these leadership opportunities in policy and in implementation, especially for students from our historically and currently underserved and underrepresented communities. And we also are envisioning that our students are continuing to help us as a state improve our education system so that we're meeting students where they're at. We're recognizing their brilliance and supporting them in realizing their full potential. And last but not least, we also are envisioning this collaborative really helping build and nurture a regional student leadership network around the state so that students see themselves reflected and represented, and that they're connected with other student leaders. They know where to go for support, and they are supported in their efforts to improve our education system. With that, we urge you to adopt the -2 amendment and pass House Bill 3363. Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Peraza. And we have one last speaker, Jessica Ventura from the Department of Education.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, Chair Alonso Leon, Vice Chair Neron, Vice Chair Weber, and members of the House Education Committee. I'm Jessica Ventura, Government Relations Director for the Oregon Department of Education. And I am here speaking today on behalf of the Governor's Office, as well as the Oregon Department of Education, in support of including students in our education policy process, which is exactly what House Bill 3363 and the -2 aim to do. Just from some quick background, currently the state of Oregon does not maintain a formal and designated student body responsible for advising the department to ensure racial equity and justice for Oregon students that are specifically includes Oregon students. The State Board of Education does have 2 student advisor positions that help inform the State Board of Education and ODE's executive leadership team. However, there isn't a body as we're aiming to do here in House Bill 3363. I won't talk about the details of the bill, as Peraza did a really good job of summarizing the -2 amendments, but I will say that we're very thankful to the chief sponsors for putting this bill forward. We're proud to support students' involvement in education policy. Just to remind the committee that ODE's equity stance reads as follows. Education equity is the equitable implementation of policy, practices, and procedures and legislation that translates into resource allocation, education rigor, and opportunities for historically and currently marginalized youth, students, and family, including civil rights protected class. This means the restructuring and dismantling of systems and institutions that create the dichotomy of beneficiaries and the oppressed and the marginalized. Equity is at the forefront of how we approach this session, and House Bill 3363 fits perfectly into our equity work. The Governor's Office and ODE urges your adoption of the -2 amendments and your full support of House Bill 3363. Thank you very much, and I'm here for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jessica. So we'll make a little bit of time for questions from our committee members. Anybody have questions? Yes, it looks like Rep. and you have a question.
I do, and I totally support this bill. I will be voting yes for it. But as I read it, I have to ask, is this designed to hear the voices of all students? As I read through there, it sounds like it's for a select group of students. So could somebody kind of explain how we're hearing from all students? Thank you. Or maybe we're not.
Go ahead, Parsa.
Chair Alonso-Leon, Representative Reardon, thank you for the question. So the intention of this group is to be inclusive of all students, but we also recognize that there are certain students of color, students from different marginalized communities that experience different barriers when it comes to accessing leadership opportunities. So the intention here is for the collaborative to identify those different barriers and remove those barriers and provide supports for those students. So we're working with students from all different backgrounds, but also recognize that there are particular groups of students that may need additional support. And we really want to make sure that we're centering that racial equity and justice component, because for us, it's both a process and an outcome of this work.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Rep. Neron and then Rep. Solomon.
Thank you, Chair Alonso-Leon. I just wanted to emphasize that out of respect for the amount of time we have in committee, we don't have all of the students offering oral testimony today, but I do want to emphasize something that was brought up earlier, that there is a lot of student testimony on OLIS. I believe almost 20, if not more than 20 students have contributed written testimony, and I really do encourage you to read that. Along with that, I think it's also telling to read the opposition testimony as well. I think that we can learn a lot from the viewpoints that are expressed, and all of it to me underlines the importance of having student voice and this particular collaborative. And I want to emphasize, thank the students who have participated in this long process and the complexity that they've offered for their plan, and as well as Parasa's incredible leadership and work within that group and bringing the communication piece to this whole process. And then I want to just thank the very professional and thoughtful students who have shown us the well thought out plan that they have. But yes, lots more testimony online than we will hear today. So wanted to emphasize that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Neron. Rep. Solomon.
Thank you, Chair Alonso-Leon, and thank you so much to the chief co-sponsors that are bringing this forward. I just really want to just make a comment in that this is such an incredible opportunity. As a former school board member in Hillsborough, we tried all that we could to make sure that we were getting student voice at the table to really reflect on their experiences in the classroom to better serve our decision-making in a boardroom. And very proud of the Hillsborough school board members that made that a reality. And we now have student reps on the board, and incredibly proud of them. And as well as it makes me reflect and think about the Youth Advisory Council members in Hillsborough and what they do to take the passions and the ideas and the things that drive them for positive change, and they put that to action. They were instrumental in passing the banning of the plastic bag bill because they saw that as such an issue, and they saw that together in doing that. So how incredible that we have students that are willing to lend their experiences so that other students cannot feel the pain and the left behind that perhaps they have experienced, and so they can better strengthen that future students in classrooms. So I'm so incredibly proud of this bill, and really thank the co-chief sponsors for all their incredible work and the amazing advocates. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Solomon. Rep. Weber.
Thank you, Chair Alonso-Leon and committee members. How many people are we talking about in total for this group?
Go ahead, Parsa.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure you saw my hand. Thank you. Chair Alonso Leon, Representative Weber, thank you for the question. So we're envisioning at least 2 student representatives coming from every single education service district. And there's also some language in the bill that would allow for more student representatives to come from a larger ESD region in the state. So that gives you a sense of how many student representatives we're looking at. There's 19 ESDs altogether. 19 times 2 is 38, and at a minimum. And the Department of Ed, in collaboration with the Student Collaborative, can also adjust and add members to cover more highly populated parts of the state.
May I ask another question?
Follow up? Go ahead.
Do you think that you will have adequate representation from all of the lists that you have notated in that group? Do you think that that's enough people, or do you think that every one of these groups will be adequately represented?
Thank you so much for the question, Chair Alonso Leon, Representative Weber. We recognize that it's going to take a lot of time and intention and planfulness around the recruitment of students, as well as the adult members that would serve on the collaborative. So one of the things that we've talked about with different student leaders and partner organizations is setting up this interim work group to work really closely with the department, the Youth Development Division, and the different community partners to get a sense of where do we have student representatives who might be interested in serving on the collaborative, what's the process for applying, and then in areas where we may need some additional support in helping make sure that students are aware of the opportunity and are supported in applying for the opportunity, that they have those supports in place. So that's the reason why we've developed that interim work group to help ensure that we can work to reach the representation that we're looking for on the student collaborative.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the questions. I don't see any more raised. All right. Well, I am going to be carrying over this work session for House Bill 3363 to Thursday. And I am now closing the public hearing on House Bill 3363.